and then we'll do the Harry Sisson stuff.
Plus 19, that's basically 20, so that's about 75%. 85% of
which percent of the USA violence in the last 5 years is left wing versus right wing? In terms of like overall amount of damage, I think that the BLM stuff kind of takes the cake there. I don't think you can win that argument unless you want to go by individual events and you count the whole BLM stuff as one event, maybe. But
people think that the vast majority of the violence is left-wing violence and extremism. This gaslighting and this bullshit about how, oh no, it's both sides. It's not both sides. It's one side doing it. And then one or two instances of something like January 6th happens, and people constantly fixate on that.
Like, I'll say this a million times. I'm trying to think of who I'm even talking to when I say this, because it's such an obviously stupid fucking point. Whether you agreed or disagreed with the BLM riots, okay, you're talking about a huge series of riots that were driven by a couple different big factors. One was probably the fact that everybody was inside because of COVID. People were bored as fuck, okay? Probably had a decent amount to do with it. One, and then two, the general feelings in the country related to police violence. And then three, this new thing of getting videos now of watching people being, killed by cops on camera. I think seeing footage of stuff like that sends people into a frenzy. I think that was why, it was probably why the Rodney King stuff like exploded across LA so much, right? It's because wasn't that all on video that people saw him get his ass whipped by multiple cops? I don't think I've ever actually seen that video before, but so like, was it a lot of damage? Yeah, for sure. Were there a lot of protests? Absolutely. Were most of them peaceful? Of course they were. Otherwise, there would have been like trillions of dollars of damage. Was there a lot of rioting and a lot of violent protesting that caused a lot of damage? Yeah, of course. This is all true, for sure. That's a lot different, though. It's a different kind of thing than the J6 stuff, which was the president intentionally undermining the election with no evidence, calling people to go to the Capitol and overthrow the electoral process because he didn't like the outcome of the election. Like, these are two different things. You would never compare these one to one. It just doesn't make sense to do so. Like, imagine if somebody were to say, like, the BLM riots were terrible. Really? How many people died? A couple dozen or something? What about heart disease? Well, okay. What the fuck? Are you supposed to compare the two? You think the BLM riots were bad? Have you seen how many people die from car accidents in the United States? I don't see you protesting that. Well, not really the same thing. We're not really talking about the same thing. Yeah.
Without thinking about anything else besides it. I don't think your sources are valid. So why is it that my sources are not valid, but everybody seemingly comes to the exact same conclusion?
Did he just say, why are my sources not valid, when his source is a poll of his Twitch chat, and then say, why does everybody come to the same conclusion? And by everybody, he means people that are on his curated media feed. What?
Why is this happening? Go figure, a right-wing chat thinks this. Statistic websites seem to differ. Well, the reason why statistic websites are differing is
there's an answer here that's a usual propaganda answer. Although it's not just a propaganda, so there's some truth to it. It's because they count a right-wing violent event as anybody that does anything bad against some type of person. They don't count right-wing and left-wing correctly. I wonder if that's the answer he's going to give.
It's because their methods of data is inaccurate. The way that they are providing the data and the way that they're analyzing it is deliberately misrepresentative.
That's what I don't know if he will get far enough, but that's what he's saying here.
That's the reason why. And so the poll itself is the source, bro? Yeah, exactly. This is much more accurate. Yeah, it is. There you go. And so you can see very clearly, this is it. The left also enables migrant criminality. This is an obvious echo chamber. I have a conversation which actually studies this.
I think you've said in the past that you don't think Asmon is dumb. What do you think is going on here? Audience capture plus bad media environment. Yeah. Same thing. Like the Coleman Hughes guy, I think was a good example. The Coleman Hughes guy seems genuinely pretty intelligent. The Tom Bilyeu guy seems genuinely pretty intelligent. Like these are like decently high IQ people that can entertain complex thoughts, but they get like captured into such horrible media bubbles. And it's just, yeah.
Well, I don't need to have a conversation with somebody. All I have to do is open my eyes and look what I've seen in the media for the last 5 years. What company have right-wing people targeted and burned down dealerships for or buildings for? Right, Chamber have a conversation which actually studies this? Well, I don't need to have a conversation with somebody. All I have to do is open my eyes and look what I've seen in the media for the last 5 years. What company have right-wing people targeted and burned down dealerships for or buildings for in the last 5 years? What company did this happen to? None. That's right. None. It doesn't happen.
One thing that I also don't like, I don't know if there's a name for this fallacy. I don't like it when people point out to a reaction being bad because it's a novel reaction. Heuristically, when new things happen that are bad, then it's a bad thing. But if it's in a response to something that's novel, I feel like it's not a fair analysis. Another really common example of this is when you say, Trump got charged with more crimes than any president in the history of the United States. No one's ever gone after a president like this. Therefore, it must be corruption. And I was like, okay, I understand the heuristic, and that is fair to think that something weird is going on here. But couldn't the novel legal response to Trump be a response to novel behavior? Maybe Trump is like the first president who's just so outlandishly criminal in his behavior. Like, if that was the case, then wouldn't you think that a novel response is warranted? You know? Similar to the Tesla stuff, when you say have leftists ever, or people on the left ever attacked car dealerships before, or I'm sorry, people on the right, have they ever attacked car dealerships before? I don't know the answer now. I think the answer is no. I've never heard of it before. But also, there's never been a president who's had the CEO of a car company be his personal friend, buy a social media campaign or a social media company for him, stump speech and everything to help him win the election, donate millions of dollars to him and help him like tear apart the government. Like, there's just no parallel here, right? Like, are you telling me that if the CEO of Ford Motors, was George Soros and he was in the White House every single day with President Biden and they were going through the VA and tearing it apart, you don't think right-wingers would have violently protested? Like, I don't know. It's hard to say because like the liberals, it's a failure of imagination.
I never lost a night's sleep over them. They were necessary. And whatever I imagined necessary for the safety of House Tyrell, I did. But your sister has done things I was incapable of imagining.
That's the left's problem. We got to get more violent. I'm just kidding. Why does Jesse think Coleman is consuming bad media? There are these two things that I've like honed in on, and I'm sure my mind will be fleshed out more as I like read more in depth and I do more research, and I'm doing politics full time for a year now. Like, as I watch stuff more and more, there are two kind of like, I don't want to call them fallacies, but like thought problems that I've like identified that are very difficult to talk about and very difficult to perceive unless you're being very deliberate with it. One of these I've talked about both of these. I've talked about the first one a lot, the magnitude thing, right? That understanding magnitude is as important sometimes, maybe even more important than understanding the individual causes of a thing itself, right? Okay, why did this person die? Well, this person died because they had lung cancer, they had COVID, they had high blood pressure, they had a bruise from hitting their shin on a table, and they got shot in the head with an AK-47, all right? Okay, well, we have 5 things here for all things that maybe kind of contributed to their death, but that the shot from the AK-47, that's probably like the major one. That was probably the really big one, right? Probably more than the other 4, so much so that maybe those other 4 don't even matter that much, right? It might have been a stage 1 cancer or a non-malignant tumor, then you wouldn't call it cancer. The COVID might have been whatever, right? the magnitude stuff is really important. This is especially true when talking about history, where people are like, why did this guy do this thing? Well, here's a quote from a leader. Okay, talk to me about the context. What was going on at that time? What were both countries experiencing at the time? What was the political reality of what was going on? Like these are things we have to consider when figuring out what were the motivations or causes for a thing, so we can understand the magnitude of the effects. So the magnitude thing is one thing. People that aren't very media literate or literate in whatever they're talking about don't understand the magnitude thing. A great example of not understanding magnitude, for instance, is if you want to cut federal spending, you need to do a systematic or programmatic cut. You need to start cutting programs. If you look at the federal deficit or the debt and you say, how are we going to counter this? Waste, fraud, and abuse. You don't understand magnitude. You're never, ever, ever making a significant cut into even the deficit by targeting waste, fraud, and abuse. That's delusional. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about, right? So magnitude is one thing. And then the second thing was, somebody said, why do you think he's in a bad media bubble? The second thing is, sometimes people that don't have, there's a question of focus. And I don't know how to express that simply in words. So, but I think intuitively, we all understand this. If I were to ask somebody, tell me some bad things that happened around, like during all of World War II, tell me some bad things that happened. And if somebody says, well, it was bad that a lot of Russians were killed in Germany. It was the Dresden bombings were bad. The Tokyo firebombing was bad. And the amount of civilians, I think, that died in Europe, that was bad. If somebody told you that, everything they said is true, and the magnitude even is like appropriate. They're not necessarily saying a thing was worse than anything else, right? So everything is true. What do you fight on there? Because in your mind, what you think is like, hold on, why is that your focus? Or how do you not bring up, how do you not mention the Holocaust? That's really weird. How would you not mention that? That's just the what you're focusing on or what your knowledge is about says a lot about your understanding of a situation and how you're trying to come to an understanding of a situation. So when I argue with people, when I look at like Tom Bilyeu, or if I look at like Coleman Hughes, they're not stupid people and they're not lying about things or not understanding things. But then when I have a conversation with them and I'm like, okay, tell me about why you were unhappy with the Hunter Biden stuff. And they can go through that. Okay, well, tell me why you were unhappy with the Obama drone strike and stuff. Okay, they can go through that. Tell me what you think about Trump pardoning the J6 guys. I didn't follow anything about J6. You have just a blind spot there? Okay, what about like the Trump lawsuits against I don't know anything about that. Okay. I don't know what to talk to you about. Wait, how can you not know anything about any of these? I've mentioned this as kind of like the debate strategy of saying, oh, I've never heard of that, or I don't know anything about it. I was like, well, how can you not? I don't understand that. I don't know how to explain that second thing, but like the first thing I've noticed for people, but like you can be very wrong on these two things. You can be very wrong on these two things, but you can be very intelligent coded, or I shouldn't say intelligent coded. You can be very persuasive, right? I can tell you that Churchill was like an evil person, and maybe rattle off some facts that maybe are even kind of compelling, but it's a matter of focus and it's a matter of magnitude, because I'm not accurately conveying who is contributing more to the problems in post-World War I or pre-World War II, more specifically Europe, and it's a matter of focus. I'm not telling you the full story. These are two huge issues right now that are driving me crazy, and it's present in almost every single person that covers media, but whatever.
None. That's right. None. It doesn't happen. So
it's willful ignorance. That's the thing. I don't think it's willful ignorance all the time. If you're stuck in a media bubble and you see so much of a thing over and over and over and over again, like for somebody like Asmongold, like listen to what he's saying. These are almost truisms, right? For something like Asmongold, he's saying, why is every single person coming to the same conclusion? He probably feels that way. And when I debate people, right, you guys get mad sometimes if I don't go hard enough on them, or they just seem like really dumb. And I try to explain sometimes to you guys that when I'm saying things to these people, I'm probably the first person that they've ever heard say any of these things in their entire life, unironically. Where I'll say something like, actually, I think that Trump probably wasn't good for the deficit, and I think Biden was probably better when it comes to deficit handling than Trump was. That's going to be a statement that a lot of MAGA or centrist types or conservative types or people that consume like podcast info, they've never heard that statement in their life. So you've got me, who is a random streamer guy, telling them a statement they've never heard in their entire life, and they've got a whole body of media and entertainment that's told them the exact opposite. Why the fuck would they listen to anything I say? And then from there, you'd have to be willing to dig into data and analyze stuff, but it's a lot of work at that point, right? You saw how long it took when I was talking to PF, or PJ Young, what is his name? I always fuck it up. when we had to go through just that one statement by Vivek about the government banning archery classes or cooking classes or whatever. Like, it took like an hour, PFU. It took like an hour just to go through that one statement. And that was one statement. And these people are hearing thousands of these types of statements every single day from a ton of different sources, you know?
None. That's right. None. It doesn't happen. So it's just simply not the same. Yeah, please name one. Exactly. It's so...
Oh, and then on top of all of that, when it comes to political figures online dealing with other political figures, or at least in the streaming space, or especially in the streaming space, it carries over to the YouTube space to some extent, but it's really bad. Maybe not so much with Vosh anymore, but for Hassan, right? Is when I do give novel arguments, nobody ever actually addresses them. Nobody does a knockdown on anything that I've said. It's either endless pedantry, so like when I'm arguing with Fabian, or sometimes Andrew Wilson, or it's like, oh, this is a pedophile, sex cultist, rapist person who is a Mossad paid shill. Even Finkelstein is spreading the rumor that I got paid by the Mossad, and they spent dozens of hours prepping me. They spent, what did he say 6 weeks that they spent prepping me for our conversation?
Speaking of people you may think are stupid, what was the story?
So not only am I fighting against like the bad media environment, all of these kind of like built-in fallacies, presenting novel facts to people, but there's also like active disinformation campaigns.
With Destiny and Lex Friedman.
Lex Friedman originally wanted me on with Destiny. I said, that's not going to happen. He then contacted me about 3 weeks later, and he said, how about coming on with Benny Morris? I said, fine. Benny Morris is serious. I think his politics are hard. And Destiny. And at that point, I faced a dilemma, which I'm not afraid to be. And I said, well, if he's, and that would be Muin Rabbani. Why Friedman was so determined that I would be on with Destiny. Now, you might say for broad public interest, but the debate between me and Benny Morris would already have a lot of public interest, especially during the high. So why was he so determined? And that question remains. That question remains.
Do you have any idea?
Nope. But when I was told that that person called Destiny was paid and coached. Now, I've made the allegation already. I've said what I just told you. And then that thing called Destiny went on and said, he's looking for a libel lawyer. But nothing ever, obviously, I think the very last thing he wanted to do was litigate this.
Well, there are no damages. I think I already said this. It's not.
This discovery would be a very uncomfortable thing for him. I've already said publicly that I know that he was paid. I know, but I never said the Mossad. I said, quote, an Israel advocacy group.
Oh.
Because that's what I was told. And he was paid, quote, a handsome sum. I was also told, quote, that they rehearsed with him for several weeks to prepare him for the occasion.
I'd like to get right into...
Yeah, it's just like there's just so much shit to always be working through. It's so fucking annoying, but... I'm going to keep dick riding Coleman, I guess. Any examples about him, Destiny? Coleman didn't do any of that. I haven't heard of that, or debate tags or anything. He engaged with you on all the Trump criticism. I feel like there was a bit of, when I brought stuff up, he was like, oh, I don't know as much. Fuck, I'd have to go back and re-listen. I had this conversation like a month ago, so I don't remember everything we spoke about, but the easiest one to usually go after is the deficit. Did we talk about this? Hold on. Because that'll be the one thing where people say, well, I think the debt or the deficit support. It's like, okay, how could you possibly support Trump? Did we talk about this? Savings as well. This is going to decrease the revenue coming in. And then on top of that, we've got dome, but like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude, probably $500-ish billion in our own. So contributions like Stop talking
to military instead of the too big. And whatever. Maybe even if they did find some waste, fraud, and abuse, maybe they could cut a little bit. But I think we're talking on 5% of their GDP to military.
No one cares.
And so if he's saying 5%, we're talking about like a 50, 60, 70% increase in our own military spending, which is on the scale of...
Explain why you couldn't get damages from that, Destiny. For somebody defaming me, because I'd have to show, well, what income or what money or what opportunities have I lost because he lied about me, right?
probably $500-ish billion. So that's the defense is already our biggest line item in our discretionary spending. So whatever money might be saved by discovering waste, fraud, and abuse is totally like 10 orders of magnitude gone, or not 10, but like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude gone because of the increase in whatever military spending would happen. And he's talking about other things to imply increase as well, like building an Iron Dome over America, whatever the fuck that means, building more ships for our Navy, whatever that means, spend there. And then on the other side, right, you have your spending and you've got your income. He wants to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and I think he even wants to expand it a bit because he's talking about other types of taxes as well. This is going to decrease the revenue coming in. And then on top of that, we've got plane actually. So this is something that's going to probably decrease GDP. What are the chances that you think, one, that the deficit is going to be gone, our spending deficit will be gone, or two, that it'll even get smaller, I guess, under Trump? It feels like
I would say, as of now, I would say the odds our deficit gets smaller under Trump are less than 50%.
Okay. Here's an issue. Okay, so I just laid out. God, I just fucking yapped so much because I got all this information in my brain now because we've been following politics. I just yapped so much. So there's maybe there's less than a 50% chance that the deficit. I should have asked. What do you think? Do I ask this? What are the chances that it would have gotten smaller under Kamala?
Which is a very optimistic, even to say that, to say any number other than 0 is optimistic. And the only reason I'm even that optimistic is because of how much popular sentiment and support Doge seems to have.
Those two things aren't even logically connected. Because Doge is popular, they're going to be able to magically save money? What?
Just to say, only time in my lifetime I've seen a significant number of people salivating over the idea of cutting.
What? Republicans talk about cutting spending and cutting the government all the time. What?
Government for more than 2 seconds. So that's what gives me some optimism. Everything else that you said to me, which I agree with, gives me no optimism. I don't think that Trump cares about cutting the government at all. I think Elon does care about it. I do not think Trump cares about it.
Why do we think Elon cares about it?
I think Trump has accurately surmised that Elon has a following and Elon is powerful and he's a good ally right now. And Trump, like every president in our lifetime, I think is happy to pass the baton of the national debt to the next president, which is the fundamental problem. Is that no one's going to be held accountable for this, and the president that inherits the debt crisis, if and when it eventually comes, can and will be accurate in blaming every past president, and we won't hold him or her accountable for it. That's the entire problem. Tariffs, dumb idea. Unless it's a negotiating tactic where in the next 3 months he gets some kind of trade deal with these countries, which...
Do I focus on this? Why do we have to use tariffs on our allies?
I think is very...
How long are we going to allow these?
All it does is...
I don't know if
it hurts more Americans than it helps. Obviously, the steel industry is going to be very happy today.
But everybody downstream from them is going to be...
Everyone downstream from them, which is more people than are in the steel industry, more Americans are going to be hurt by it. And so, yeah, I don't expect that. I would say I do feel probably his 5% thing on military spending is something he doesn't mean as an end goal. I think he's saying that to whatever countries still haven't got to 2%. I think he's saying that as a negotiating tactic to try to scare them and get them to 2%. And I don't think he intends to increase our spending to 5%.
Have you ever seen it on YouTube? There's a skit comedy group called Always Friday TV. Okay, they make YouTube shorts. There's some guy. It's called the DuPont Method, and he's like a business guy who just does crazy shit or whatever. And there's a skit where he's like, this is how you negotiate, for selling a car. And he's like, I want to sell you this car and I want you to try to negotiate the price down. Like, I was like, well, I can't. And then I think he takes out a gun and he's like, if you don't buy this car from me, I'm going to kill myself or whatever. I'm going to blow my head off.
And we'll threaten him by putting a gun up to his head, right? That'll do it.
Holy shit. We've got production quality here. Good job, August.
That won't do it. If you really want to get what you want, you'll threaten him with your own life.
One of the big problems I have with Trump is I feel like we'll talk about the no accountability thing, but the second thing is that it's very difficult to deal with anything he says with any of his followers because people immediately run to that, well, he doesn't mean it, or it's just a negotiating tactic. And it's like, okay, well, let's throw out number one because that's stupid. He doesn't mean it. Let's say it's a negotiating tactic. Is that actually a fair excuse to be unhinged? There's a lot of people I could negotiate with if I were to just, bring a pistol with me or threaten to kill their whole family or threaten to do whatever unhinged stuff. But I feel like when you're in a world where Trump is like, I'm not taking the military off the table for Greenland, and Mexico and Canada, maybe I'm going to 25% tariff everything, despite the fact that, by the way, that trade agreement that we have with them was his crowning achievement from his first administration was the renegotiated NAFTA.
Right.
It can't just be that the United States president can just say literally anything. And it's like, well, that's a negotiating tactic, He's not actually, especially because that kind of defeats the point of a negotiating tactic. Nobody thinks he'll actually do it. Well, he doesn't really mean that. He's just saying that,
Well, I think it can work sometimes. And part of the reason it can work is because even we take him seriously, right?
So there's a third, God, these are advanced level. I don't want to call them fallacies. It's the magnitude thing. It's the selected focus thing. And it's a selective charitability thing to where if I were to talk about DEI, I don't think, also, let me be super clear. I like Coleman Hughes. I quoted actually a whole blog thing of his, not quoted, but I used it as the basis for an argument about living conditions in the Gaza Strip. I think he's a smart dude. And I think he's legitimately a centrist I don't think he's like a Trump dick suck in disguise, like most people who are of his political persuasion are. I don't think he's like that. So I think he's an okay guy. He's not like, I'm not trying to rag on him or anything. But if I were to say, okay, well, what if we tried the hardest we could, to make DEI work? I don't know if he would say, well, I don't know if he would say
It can work sometimes, and
DEI can work sometime. I don't know if he would say that. Maybe he would, but I feel like I'd have to push him to say it. Whereas with Trump, he would be eager to offer up that excuse, right? Somebody suggests a DEI policy. I feel like the default is, that's horrible. Don't do it. Oh my God. Trump suggests suiciding the nation. And it's like, well, it could work. Maybe not. I admit it's not a great idea, but it could work. It's like, well, why the selective charitability here?
part of the reason it can work is because even we take him seriously, right?
I think I can't tell. I don't know who does anymore.
Well, you took his 5% thing seriously, right?
I don't know. I actually don't. Like, I could literally see at this point, like, Trump is pure chaos. Like, anything could stem from that. Because it seems like he gets bored with things and he moves on in like a month anyway.
Yeah.
But then, like, this Gaza thing, is that for real?
My guess is that's also a negotiating tactic.
Okay.
Negotiating what?
I think he's...
Yeah, thank you. Good question. What are we negotiating? What are we negotiating?
My guess is that... my guess is that it could be something like, okay, he's gonna be at the table with the Saudis soon, and he wants them to believe he's willing to do incredibly crazy things if they don't get a deal, if they don't join the Abraham Accords. And so he wants them to fear that the U.S. will have troops in Gaza, or he wants them to think there's even a 10% chance of that, and as a result, the Arab Street will go crazy. And if he feels that if they worry about that, they'll be more friendly.
Okay.
And they'll have a fire under their ass to not drag out the negotiations or something. That could be the calculus.
Okay.
And I do think this is like...
Yeah. Anyway, I don't mean to give the impression, because apparently there was a fan or two of his in my chat. I'm going to give the impression I hate Coleman or anything. I think he's a smart dude. I don't think he's bad faith or anything. It's just the selective, like, there's a media bubble thing going on here. ACLU attorney Gellernt, what is this random lettered name? What the fuck? Says there were people who returned from El Salvador after the flights because they either weren't Venezuelan or were women, and the El Salvadorian government declined to take them. Boasberg vows to get to the bottom of whether his order was violated. How long is it going to take you to figure this out, Chief? God. Okay. I've heard this called theory-splaining by Ezra Klein. When people act like Trump has some kind of plan, when it's actually just retardation. Oh, sure.
Yeah, please name one. Exactly. It's so... And this is the thing, is that a lot of people that are defenders of this are going to try to use, like, these arguments. Oh, yeah, well, look at this study that, uses a frame of reference from 1948 to make a judgment call on what's happening now.
Why not just say I've never read a single study in my entire life about anything ever? Why not just say that?
It's outrageous.
All right, last thing.
You are not and have never been a member of the Nazi Party of the United States, have you?
Come on, Tom, are you serious? Nope.
Thank you. Sorry to have to even ask. And, oh yes, the Hitler dog thing.
Okay, the dog thing's bullshit.
Great, I thought so.
Different spelling.
Okay, different spelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Okay, the dog thing's bullshit.
Great, I thought so.
Different spelling.
Okay, different spelling.
Yeah.
Okay, and this other one that came up, just to fend this off, have you ever read Mein Kampf?
Yeah, a couple times, I
Hitler's dog was named Blondie. Oh.
guess.
A couple of times?
Okay.
Are there Easter eggs in there you didn't get the first time?
Look, I'm interested in that period of history, Tom, okay? I've skimmed it.
Skimmed, yeah, thank you. And what specifically do you find interesting about that period of history?
The scale. The tragedy.
Hell yeah.
Of who?
Which tragedies specifically?
Europe decimated. 7 million Germans, 20 million Russians, 5 million Poles.
Oh, shit. Okay, I understand why you like this.
Yeah. Just checking the till here, Mark, and it seems you're short a few million.
Million?